Hi. So today we're going to be talking about a topic that is near and dear to my heart, and I know is a subject that a lot of people struggle with, and that is anxiety. So I've got Lianne Johnson of Avenues Counseling here. Say hi.
Hi.
Hey. And we're going to have a conversation on Get Real to Heal about anxiety today. Stay tuned. Let's see if they can see us here. All right, I think I've got us both in screen for a change.
Oh, you got a heart.
Great, hi. Yes, got a
Awesome.
heart already.
That's right.
Winning. All right, let's let Mama Ellie know that we're ready. She raised an eyebrow. I'm not sure if that was a... Oh, yeah, so let's have you... I love her.
That's awesome. I'm sorry.
That's okay. You were just adding to the little
No,
conversation.
say that. Hi there. Hi. I apologize.
Which bikes do you want us on?
Let's see, because you're doing that. Okay, let's put you on this one. Yeah, so that.
All right.
Okay, and Lianne, give me just a
Show
second.
me how it's done.
Well, I didn't want to. Like bust you in the face. I'm really good. I haven't busted anybody yet, so.
I mean, we did just meet, so.
I know,
yeah.
but you know.
Yeah. All right.
Okay. Okay, now
Okay.
let's have you sit. Okay, like that, so that.
Okay. Good.
This is a new experience.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
You're gonna sit about at that level.
Oh, sure.
Okay. Good. And. I know. I always have to put it a little
I know,
closer for
and
you because you're
I
always.
end up halfway through the show. I'm like, I feel like I'm
I know, but you always start out so soft.
I know.
And then you pick up steam.
And then I pick up. Right, that is my habit. She knows me well.
Well, there you go.
We've done this a few times.
Yeah, we have. As a matter of fact, 58.
58
That's
times.
awesome.
Yeah. That's exciting.
Yeah,
Yeah. I'm excited about this topic.
me too.
I'm excited, not anxious.
Okay, I'm anxious.
Oh,
Oh,
okay.
Yes.
Yeah, can you hear?
Yeah.
Good to go.
No, I don't, but I'll find
time
out.
to roll with it. Shake that out. And now we wait.
Oh, okay.
This is Amanda LaPlante, and you are listening to Get Real to Heal on KWRHLP 92.9 FM. Today I am here with Lianne Johnson of Avenues Counseling. Welcome.
Thank you. It's so great to be here.
Yeah, I'm glad to have you. And we are going to talk about, well, a few things, but anxiety is the big topic of the day.
Mm-hmm.
So I will tell you, I was on a committee at Brentwood School District, and I'm just going to start in with this story just to kind of give a little bit of an idea for people that might be listening to how big of an issue anxiety has become, not just for adults, but really across the spectrum, right, across the human population.
Yes.
I was on this committee for the Brentwood School District. It was a wellness committee, and we were surveying parents on what their hot button issues were, things that they were most concerned about in their kids and didn't know how to deal with, needed some tools. And to our surprise, the vast majority, and I'm talking like maybe just a very small handful of people didn't respond with this answer, but the vast majority said anxiety was their number one concern. And we're talking about parents of, kindergartners
Yes.
and preschoolers,
Yes.
all the way up.
Yes.
It was shocking to me.
Yeah. It's amazing. I mean, at Avenues Counseling, one of the things that we focus on is anxiety. And that's the way that I mentor the staff and train the staff, because and my message to the staff is, hey, you know what? Just plan on about everyone that you meet with has some level of anxiety that they're struggling with, because it is so prevalent in our society these days. It's mind-boggling.
Yeah. Okay, so we're going to dive deep on this topic. The first thing I'm going to do, though, is back up a little bit,
Yes.
and let's talk about Avenues Counseling
Sure.
and how that came about, your story.
Sure. Yeah, well, Avenues Counseling was planted, if you will, started in 2011. I was working at a church at the time, and the church asked if I'd start a counseling center. And so in 2011, we launched Avenues Counseling. We're a nonprofit counseling center in St. Louis. We're located in Richmond Heights, and our focus, our main mission, is to make sure that anyone who has a need for counseling can receive it regardless of their ability to pay. And so what we do throughout the year is we fundraise, and we have counselors that donate time, and we look to be community based, and so we serve children as young as 4 up through adults and the elderly.
It's great work.
It's been amazing to see it grow. So when we started, we just had about 3 counselors, and now we have 11, and it's been neat to see the community come in and receive help. Getting help, asking for help can be really a scary process, and so we're thankful by the time they get to us that they've risked and taken the courage to give us a call and take that first step in whatever it is that's getting them to call in and ask for help.
It is hard to take that first step.
Yes.
I can speak from experience that taking that first step is a massive challenge. I remember a few years ago I was in just a really incredibly low place, not just with my health, but with my my physical health, but my mental health as well. And I was raised in a family where, and if they're watching, love you guys, love my family. I grew up in an area and in a family that didn't really believe in that sort of thing. My mom was more than willing to take me to a psychologist and try to work through some things when I was in my late teens, because I was really having a lot of issues. And but it was just really a struggle to just embrace that idea of going to counseling.
Mm-hmm.
I have to say, now that I've finally done it, it has been such a transformative process and so just invaluable.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah. So I just want anybody that's watching, I want to encourage you to be brave and take that step.
Mm-hmm. And what I found as I work with people, is that anxiety has this level of shame that's attached to it.
Well said.
That people fear that they're the only one who is struggling in this way, who has the spiraling thoughts that they can't stop, who has a panic attack. And the reality is, what do the statistics say? It's 40 million adults age 18 to 54.
It's staggering.
It is staggering. It's everywhere. And so one of the things that I tell people that I work with is, 40 million adults, guess what? You're not alone. And I'm not a big statistic girl, but I'll use that one because I think it helps people to normalize their experience and say, I'm not alone, and I don't have to hide this. I don't have to feel like I'm not good enough or I can't do life well enough. I'm not alone.
Yeah, and that's powerful.
Absolutely powerful. Yeah.
So, you were talking earlier about, you said when people come in, you tell your counselors to just realize that probably just about everyone that they're going to see has some level of anxiety they're dealing with.
Mm-hmm.
How do you recognize that?
Mm-hmm. Anxiety to me is one of those trickier things, if you will. Humans, we're all so unique, and what people are coming in for could range on so many different levels, whether it's abuse or trauma, family of origin issues, not sure how to have relationships that are thriving. And so there's some key markers, I would say, but really anxiety is the main term, but it can actualize, it can show itself in many different ways. It could be generalized anxiety, panic, disorder, social anxiety, and so making sure that counselors, at least at Avenues Counseling, that's the only people that I have, an ability to touch directly, making sure that they are aware of the updated material and skills to be able to recognize it. And so a lot of times what I see is, at least with those that I work with, is the racing thoughts is what really seems to clue me into, oh gosh, okay, so they have these racing thoughts, and I'll label them as spiraling, and I make a little spiral motion with my hand in the air, and hey, you know what, this is anxiety. And so then taking them through, what physiologically is happening when you're experiencing these things. And so, it could be racing thoughts to irritability, which I don't think is something that people usually connect with anxiety.
I get that. And my family will know. They're like, okay, what you got going on this week? What's doing this to you? And I'm even one who, I try to be very aware of, through this process. 'Cause I've been in counseling for almost 3 years, and very aware of my body as well from all of the recovery I've had. And I still have those moments where it evades or eludes me, and I have to clue back in through cues that I receive from people around me. Say more words.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that I also encourage people to do is to just tell people that they trust, hey, today's an anxious day. I mean, I struggle with anxiety, and I don't keep that from my clients. I'll say, to help normalize it, hey, you know what, I struggle with that too. And hey, because there are a lot of questions I get back is, well, but I don't want my kids to know that I'm anxious, and I don't want them to be impacted by it. And part of the thing I take them through is your kids will be impacted by it, but how they're impacted by it and how you handle it with them is key.
Okay, you just hit home for me.
Okay.
Because this is something my husband and I have been talking about this week, is my anxiety and how it may be impacting my son. And I meditate, and I do deep breathing exercises, and I teach a class called How to Chill Without a Pill. So, I'm handling my anxiety in all the best ways that I know how. But I still worry about, because it is so high, even though I've downregulated it to such an extent, it's still spilling over. It affects people in my life, and I know that. What do you say to people that come in with that question about, I don't want this to impact my kids, what can I do?
Again, this big word I keep saying, normalize. It's going to impact them. And I'll say to people that I work with, you know what, sometimes I just have an anxious day and I have no idea why. Just like you were saying, I do all of these things, I'm regulating, I know I'm taking care of myself, and yet I can still have an anxious day. And so I'll say, sometimes you'll just have an anxious day and you don't know why. And I get it. I get that that's super annoying, and I get that it's crazy making, but accept it. Accept the limitations. Accept the fact that you don't have total control over the way your mind and body works sometimes. And so if you accept it and normalize it, it'll be easier to take those around you and say, I'll say to my kids, they're 13 and 10, and sometimes I'm like, guys, super sorry, just having an anxious day today, not even sure why, or, hey, such and such just happened, mom's feeling a little overwhelmed right now, can you give me 5 to 10, and just, they see that, and they're interacting with it, but in my world, that seems okay, because they might experience anxiety someday, and so I see my job as mentoring them, helping them to understand, when they feel anxious, because they do sometimes, hey, it's okay, you're okay. You can tell me or another trusted person that you feel safe with, to expose your emotions to, and you feel like they're going to honor them, right? You're okay. You will be okay. And I have to tell myself that I'm going to be okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that, and I'm going to put some of that to work. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
All right, so you mentioned a few different, and not to cut you off on flow of thought, was there anything else you wanted to say along that topic?
No, I think that was it for now.
All right, so in backing up though, I know you mentioned several different forms of anxiety, ways that it can manifest. Let's talk a little bit more about those. And I know I'm going a little bit off of plan here. We've got a good plan here.
That's right, it's fine.
But, so when you talk about, you said social anxiety, panic disorder, several other types of anxiety, for people that may not be familiar with those.
Sure. The biggest one that I see is the generalized anxiety. And so there's nothing specific per se, but you just generally feel anxious. You feel shaky, or, you're spiraling thoughts. You might feel warm. You might be sleepless. There might be different types of things going on that cause those types of symptoms. But then we also have the obsessive compulsive component of anxiety, and that's sort of the spiraling thoughts sometimes, and how we can get stuck in a rut in what we're thinking about, or the need or compulsion to do something at a certain time over and over again. And it could be as,
did you accidentally summon me?
well, I don't know why.
Thank you, Siri. We're good.
I mean, it's okay. Well, anyway, let's see.
That was really kind of her to try and help with your anxiety, though.
Yeah, right.
Were you feeling some
Right.
anxiety in that moment?
Well, yeah, I was like, what's going on?
Yeah, people can help people, Siri can help people, all good things.
Yes, indeed.
We went off the rails, but let's get back on.
Okay,
So we talked about generalized anxiety.
Yep, and then I was talking about some obsessive compulsions, and even with people that I work with let's say trauma history, it can be kind of a slippery way that it shows itself. So, for instance, there's a lot of current sad reports about abuse in the churches right now. So, sexual abuse in the church, and someone that I've worked with has had that experience, and so what they were finding is every day they were going and reading the reports, right?
Yeah.
And that's a compulsion, a need to know in order to feel calm. Now the reality is that what they're looking for actually doesn't happen. It doesn't help with the calmness, but there's a need to sort of like this, to be involved, to know what's going on and make sure that victims are being advocated and cared for, right? Because they've been through it. And so that's a way that it cannot be, most people, I think, well, I know for myself, sometimes when I think of obsessive compulsive, I think, oh, someone's like hitting something 5 times in a row, or checking the door 5 times in a row, but it can be a lot. It can actualize in a lot of different ways within someone's life.
Now I have a question for you along that line of thought. So being a sexual assault survivor myself, when the Me Too movement came out, I found myself really drawn to following that. Mm-hmm. Is that a manifestation in the way that you were talking about it, and is it necessarily always negative, or when does it become problematic?
Yeah, and it's a great question. I mean, I would not say in and of itself that's problematic. It's what you do with it. It's almost just like anything else. It's, are you going and are you involved in the movement, and are you aware of it, or are you having to be super involved in the trenches of it?
Actual compulsion.
Yeah, and like even when the Kavanaugh trials were happening, I was having people with past abuse be really triggered by that. And, for some of them, the need to really be involved in the whole process, as they showed everything on TV, as opposed to atmospherically knowing that that's going on and, grieving perhaps again for their own abuse, and knowing that abuse can happen to other people, is different than this need to go and watch and see what's going on every single moment of every single day as the trial's going on.
Okay. And another, so then I think from compulsion, so then maybe panic disorder was another that you mentioned.
Yeah, panic attacks. So panic attack is, it will come on quick, and all of a sudden you might feel a tightness in your chest, and your throat might feel like it's closing. You might get very sweaty palms, or coldness to them, perhaps even, and shakiness. And before you know it, your breathing is super off, right? And sometimes there's a trigger, if you will, that has happened that you might be aware of why it would cause you to have a panic attack. And then other times you're just unaware of what's happening in those moments. And so the big thing that I share with people is, okay, when you have those moments, right? And that's why, if I could just pivot a little bit, that is why practicing anxiety reduction skills is super important to do when you're not anxious.
100%.
Which is
absolutely
almost the hardest thing people struggle with, because it's almost like when you're not anxious, you're great. I mean, life is good, so you're not thinking, oh, I'm gonna practice my breathing 3 times today. And
I am so in tune with you on that.
Yeah.
So when I work with people, and I always recommend that if I'm dealing with someone with high anxiety, not only do we make some dietary changes to get inflammation down, re-regulate the gut, all of the other physical things that I know we can work on from a health perspective that way physically, but I always recommend they come and talk with a counselor, because that is not me. But I do get them to do some breathing techniques and relaxation techniques, release, so that they're doing that at least when they're present with me, and I encourage them to go home and do it. But what is that block about getting people to stick to doing that routinely, not just in those moments?
I don't really know. I think it's just sometimes how we're wired as human beings. It's like, if it's not a problem, it's great. Everything's fine. If I'm not having that struggle right now, I'm totally fine. And so I'll try to be really creative with people. I'll be like, you know what, like in your car, like just at a stoplight, practice practice some breathing, and I think sometimes people don't feel like that's accessible to do throughout their life, or their days, if I will say that. Oh, I have work, and how am I supposed to breathe at work? And so what I'll talk them through is, yeah, you know what? In the beginning, you might have to go in a quiet room and do your breathing. Breathe in for 5, hold it for 5, breathe out for 5. And you might need that solitude, that space and time to go and do that. And I also encourage them to pick numbers that work for them. I don't feel like there's a one number for everyone. And to say, you know what, you might have to do that at first, but then the beauty of it is the more you practice it, the more you can do breathing in the midst of a conversation and no one knows it.
Totally.
I mean, there's honestly times where I'm feeling anxious throughout my day and I'm sitting with a client and I will practice my breathing and they have no idea.
That was one of the things that at the Institute for Integrative Nutrition, where I studied, the founder of the school would talk about that all the time. He's like, when you're in a session and you're breathing, you're present, because there's a healing power in presence, and we can only be truly present if we're grounded and not anxious, right? In that. So the breathing really does help. But yeah, if we didn't practice that outside of those moments.
Yes, exactly. And so the moment you start to feel that panic attack, right, that overwhelmness, that tightness of chest, if you start your breathing, it is amazing how physiologically you feel the shift immediately.
Well, we know that the body cannot be in both the parasympathetic and the sympathetic nervous system at the same time. So your parasympathetic being your rest and digest, relaxation, all the good things happen there.
Yeah.
Sympathetic being your stress, fight or flight. Can't be in both at the same time. So that breathing technique will, but depending on which one you're doing, right? It can stimulate the vagus nerve, or one of the other wonderful ways to tell the brain that, hey, we're cool.
Yeah, we're okay.
We're okay.
Yeah.
All right, so social anxiety, if we could touch on that, because that is something that I have struggled with. And most people wouldn't know that because they think, I'm often on the microphone, I lead networking meetings, I do all kinds of things where I'm public speaking, and at times I'm actually hiding behind the microphone. And nobody realizes that, because it's actually more comfortable for me to be up there with the microphone as kind of a barrier than it is for me to be out and among everyone, which is really interesting. But talk a little bit about social anxiety and some ways that might manifest.
Yeah, well, I mean, I love your example of, hey, I can be out and about but still feeling socially anxious, right? And I think the awareness of that is key. And that's what I talk about no matter what the anxiety is. Self-awareness will help you if you are willing to know that in that moment, even though the microphone's in front of you, that you're still struggling, and own that and be aware of it and process that with yourself and where that's coming from. That's key, and that helps you break out of that. Right, and it's, again, going back to that shame component of anxiety, sometimes we just want it to go away, the fear, right? And so, I mean, social anxiety could be someone who's out and about, like you were saying, or it causes them to feel isolated from social supports, and to, they might even, it could be a range of, I can't go to work today, to, I don't have many friends, to, a myriad of different, ways.
And mine manifested a lot in family situations, especially once I had gotten married and I was going over to another family's home, and there were some things that I dealt with growing up in my own family, and I carried a lot of that with me, right? And so those thoughts, and I liked what you said in our notes. You said, when our fears of not being enough, then anxiety is born. So
exactly. Yeah. So one of the ways that I really work with people to help them break free of anxiety, no matter the form that it's showing itself in, is to help get control over their thoughts, to expose that shame, to normalize it, and to help them no longer fear the thoughts. A lot of times what I find, I don't know if you found this, but people feel like anxiety has more power and control over them than they feel like they have over it. And once I help them reframe that in their mind and say, no, actually, you have power over your anxiety, it's mind-blowing to them. And it almost gives them that, like, initial, once they're willing to accept that reality, that truth for themselves, it's almost like it gives them that little nudge of hope to say, okay, I can get over this, right? And so one of the ways that I work with people is I guess it would be CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy. I don't call it that with the people I work with, but I'll say it's a thought chain, if you will. And so, when you're in that spiraling, time in your life, or you're aware of these shame thoughts, I'm not good enough, I'm never going to be good enough, or you struggle with perfectionism, which hasn't even come up yet today.
And I was
it's a
actually
huge one.
That's the next one. We're going to talk about that. Yeah.
Is to, okay, you know what, and make your columns any way you want it, but write down that thought. Write down a thought that is causing the spiral. And then what is true or false about that thought? Okay. So the false, you identify what's false. Okay, well, what's true? Okay, well, what is the thing that you can come up with, the statement you can say that's truth about this fear you're having that's causing you anxiety? And then they come up with it. And I'll work with them in session to help them see how to do this so that they can do it on their own. And then I'll say, okay, so now the key is, every time this fearful thought comes up, this anxious thought, you have got to fight. Right? The training of your mind. So you've got to fight to remember the truthful thought and keep fighting the anxiety. And ultimately that will help the spiraling to stop.
That's great advice. And all right, so we're really close on time, but we've got to touch on perfectionism.
Yes.
So 30-second encapsulation.
Perfectionism.
Yeah.
My gosh, perfectionism. So parents out there with young kids, if you notice perfectionism in your kids, the need to get everything right, the need to always get A's, the need to be perfect, please start talking to your kids now about not being perfect, about being okay with a B, right? And if you're out there and you are a parent and you are really pushing for all those A's and stuff, be aware of how it's impacting your kid potentially. And so for adults who have had a perfectionist background in their families or in how they've dealt with school or life, I find a lot of those adults sitting in my office not understanding why they struggle with anxiety and why their quality of life is not what they would hope it would be. And it's mind-boggling for people sometimes to realize the perfectionism is what's really keeping them from having joy.
Well, and thank you for the good work that you're doing to help people break free of those chains. And how can they reach out to you at Avenues Counseling if they'd like to get more information?
Yeah, so you can reach us online at avenuescounselingcenter.org or give us a call at 314-529-1391.
Lianne Johnson, it has been a pleasure to have you here. Thank you.
Amanda. It's been great.
This is Amanda LaPlante. You've been listening to Get Real to Heal on KWRHLP 92.9 FM. For more information from me, find me online at amandalaplante.com or on facebook.com/getrealtoheal. You can find this and other episodes at soundcloud.com/getrealtoheal. And for a free 30-minute consultation, reach out to me anytime by phone, 314-583-6749. Make it a great day. There you go. Okay, good job.
Hey, thank you.
And I want to thank Siri for
Yeah.
her
Sorry about
for
that.
her appearance.
I'll see if I can kind of edit that out a little bit for you all.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Well,
I tried to jump back in and explain what had just happened, so it's kind of funny.
Yeah, it
anybody
was.
watching on here will get a kick out of it.
But no, excellent show. There were things that I guess I never realized that people went through when it came to anxiety. And when you mentioned about the Kavanaugh, I just never thought that there would be people who that would have triggered them, especially since I felt that there was a great deal of callousness that was applied to the victim. And so what you're saying is that there were other women, many women, who also suffered as a result of that.
Yes, well, so I had people come in who were saying they were triggered. I mean, that's the word people use.
Yes.
You know, it brought them back to what happened to them, and
Wow.
it resurfaces that trauma imprint, if you will, is what we call it. Just that it, when we go through trauma, it imprints on our soul, if you will.
Yes.
Yeah.
I was just reading an
It's
article
real.
today about a woman who is in a small town, I think in Montana or something like that, and she
Thanks,
was
Alexander.
sexually harassed
Hey,
by
Kim.
her boss, who was a
Thanks for
sheriff.
watching, everyone. I'll have
And
another interview in a
how
few
she
moments
has,
with Amelia
she
Mesh Rizzuto, so stay
filed
tuned.
charges against him.